morning, folks. Thanks for joining us. I am Tatsuko Gohalo. I'm with the Best Starts for Kids Prenatal to 5 team. I'm the Developmental Systems Strategic Coordinator, and I'll be walking you through our webinar this morning. I'm also joined by my colleague Juliet Escobar, who's our Developmental Promotion Lead, and Sarah J. Sanford, who's an epidemiologist with our Best Starts for Kids team, and will be guiding us through our data and evaluation slides in a few moments and supporting with questions in that topic. So we are currently recording this webinar. Everyone will be muted until the end when we'll open the line for questions. Those of you who are online can use your chat box to type in questions, and we'll keep track of those along the way, answering them at the end. And we are going to be supported by our communications specialist, Erin Murphy, who's tracking everything behind the scenes for us. So next slide, please. So this is the information webinar for our prenatal to 5 developmental screening and referral pilot projects request for proposals. Next slide. This morning, we're going to be talking briefly about what is Best Starts for Kids, how our developmental promotion strategy area fits into our Best Starts for Kids strategies. Then we'll dive into this specific pilot project RFP, and then Sarah J. will walk us through how to find data and use it to support and enhance your application, as well as some of the data and evaluation expectations that we'll have for those programs that are awarded. And then finally, we'll open it up for questions. Next slide. So we'll start with the basics around Best Starts for Kids. Next slide. So Best Starts for Kids builds on the strengths of communities and families so that more babies are born healthy, more children thrive and establish strong foundations for life, and more people grow into healthy, successful adults. Best Starts for Kids is the most comprehensive approach to child development in the nation, and while our strategies do vary based on community need, they all build upon the strength and resilience of children, young people, families, and communities. So how do we do it? In a nutshell, we are increasing the good, decreasing the bad, and then intervening when needed. So that starts with promotion. Beginning before birth and continuing throughout life, we work to increase positive resources, relationships, opportunities, and the environments that are available to children and families. We also want to ensure that we're preventing things like stress, unsafe environments, or insufficient opportunities. And then we intervene early to support children and young people who do need more resources when they need them. And all of that work goes toward building policy and systems change so all communities can thrive and prosper. And with all of that work, that means Best Starts for Kids is investing an average of $65 million a year for this work. Next slide. So for our developmental promotion strategy that this RFP falls into, we're investing $2.7 million per 2-year budget cycle. And this strategy really enables home visitors, child care providers, healthcare providers, and other community supports to monitor and really celebrate developmental milestones in collaboration with families. And that means that Best Starts for Kids is supporting developmental screening and other activities to help professionals connect families to early promotion, prevention, intervention, supports, and services during that time when the child's developing brain is most capable of change. Next slide. So as part of that developmental promotion strategy, we're currently conducting a landscape analysis of developmental screening in King County. That's going to wrap up in early 2019, and soon after we'll begin our strategic planning for developmental promotion. And these pilot projects will be running concurrent to both that landscape analysis process and our strategic planning, and help to inform the strategic plan in the spring. So the goal of this RFP is to fund several one-year projects to pilot new, expanding, or evolving developmental screening and referral programs. And contracts will fund screening materials, training, staff time, data gathering, and evaluation. We'll be awarding a maximum of $1 million through this RFP, and project requests cannot exceed $250,000. Next slide. We'll be funding a mix of projects that fall into 3 categories. The first is projects that implement a new screening program to serve populations that have been historically and persistently marginalized or otherwise limited access to regular screening. So these are programs that are already serving children and families but have never tried developmental screening and want to establish a new program that reaches a population that otherwise doesn't have easy access to screening. The second bucket are projects that strengthen or adapt an existing developmental screening tool or program in order to meet the needs of a specific community being served. Sorry, I'm going to try to reduce some of my background sound there. And so these are programs that are already doing screening but may have found that a specific screening tool or practice that they're using isn't working well for the specific population they're serving. And then the third bucket are projects that are going to be implementing or strengthening their referral or case management system. So these are programs that have a screening practice in place. The program is successful, and where they're really working to build is in the referral. So we know that not all kids are getting screened in King County, so we certainly have the goal of universal developmental screening, but we also know that those kids who are getting screened are not always getting referred or making connections to services and supports. So we also want to make sure that we're building up those referral practices and the system of services and supports. So these projects are really going to be focusing on that component. Next slide, please. So all of the applications that we receive that are complete and on time are going to be read, scored, and discussed by a panel of experts that include community members, our Best Starts for Kids staff members, members from the King County Council team of staff, and also members from our Community Youth and Advisory Board. And within the RFP, you'll find our scoring rubric that describes how we're going to be scoring the elements of your application. The RFP also points out some priorities and values that we're going to be holding in mind while we read all of your applications. And so those priorities are things like a commitment to our vision and our goals and indicators, equity and social justice, ensuring that the project meets the needs of communities and that those communities are engaged throughout the course of your project, a willingness to learn and document throughout the course of your project. There's going to be some really great successes and also some challenges that we all experience along the way, so we want to make sure that we're all sharing the learnings from those and documenting along the way. And then, of course, we're going to be looking at your prior experience implementing relevant or similar programs. So again, some of these programs may have never done screening before. That's okay. We want to know what your work with kids and families has looked like so far. So now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Sarah J., who's going to walk us through some data and evaluation components.
Thank you, Tatsuko. It's exciting to be here and help with this RFP session. I'm going to talk a little bit about two things. One is thinking through some creative ways to use data to build a strong application for this RFP. And the second is providing some information about what you can expect about evaluation and data gathering if you are funded. So we have a data and evaluation team that's part of Best Starts for Kids that's guided by three principles: partnership, collaboration, and accessibility. And what we strive for is that you'll see these principles reflected in our work together. So let me start by thinking about using data to tell your story. Tatsuko just talked through some of the funding priorities and rating criteria that proposals will be evaluated based on. And I really encourage you to keep those criteria front and center when you sit down to start working on your proposal. You'll note that including data in the application is not a criteria. You don't need to throw in some numbers just for the sake of showing that you put in numbers or that you went to King County's website. That's not what the point of encouraging you to think about using data is about. But you will probably notice or think about some ways that you can creatively use data to help make your case for some of those criteria. So we recommend thinking through what's the story that you want to tell about the difference that your organization wants to make through your project that you're proposing, the needs and the strengths that you want to build on in the community that you serve, and your organization's capacity and relationship to the community that will make you successful in doing so. So when you have an idea of that story, think about what data might be helpful to really flesh that out and make it compelling for the variety of reviewers that will be looking at these, and then go out there and find some of that data. So when we talk about data, what do we mean? Numbers are usually the first thing that pops into most folks' minds, and that's absolutely part of it. I'll be showing today some of the quantitative data that King County is making available. But it is certainly not the only way that you can use data, and it's certainly not the only kind of data that Best Starts for Kids value or will be really helpful in illustrating your ideas to the proposal reviewers. You can use maps, you can use pictures, you can use stories. Sometimes these can be really effective when used together. So you might find a statistic and then have a client story or quote that really illuminates why is this that matters in the lives of the people that you serve. We do want to remind you to always be conscious of protecting the confidentiality of people that you serve and sharing stories in ways that they are comfortable with. But keeping those in mind, using your own community's data can be really some of the most compelling data that you include in your application. I have just a kind of generic little example quote here, but I'm sure you can think of experiences that you've had that have helped form your thinking about developmental screening and how you want to do your work. So that definitely should be part of what you consider when you think about using data to help tell your story. There's tons of data out there. Reviewers aren't going to have any preferences for any specific data source. I'm going to show you Best Starts for Kids indicators so that you can understand what those are, and hopefully if you choose to dig into them, have a little bit more comfort navigating our site, but not because you need or should use that. Your own data can be some of the most compelling information. You might have data about who you serve, how your staff or your leadership reflects that community, outcomes from programs that you have been running already, and that is at least as important a source of data as King County's data. So please keep that in mind. I'm going to talk about Best Starts for Kids again because we think it's an issue of transparency and accessibility, that we want everybody who's interested to know that this data is available and be able to navigate it, but not because you should feel that you need to use it if you don't think it's going to be helpful in telling your story in your proposal. So let's go ahead and open the Best Starts for Kids indicators page. If you've had a chance to look at the look at the RFP, you've probably noticed some references to indicators and seen this link to this website before. So what this is when we look at Best Starts for Kids in a big picture sense across all of the different programs and strategies, and we appreciate your patience. It'll take just a moment to pull this up online. One second. I think you need to open Skype and present my screen. Thanks for your patience with that. So what the indicators mean for us in Best Starts for Kids are those big picture indicators of children's and families' well-being across all of King County. So no individual program is expected to move the needle on these, but it's something that we are keeping an eye on that helps us know where things are across all of our communities, and that hopefully synergistically as a big initiative Best Starts for Kids can impact. It's not something that your individual program will be evaluated against. So we have our Best Starts for Kids indicators page. You can check out here all of the indicators that we've selected to track for this initiative. And you can see that you can sort them by age group. There's prenatal to 5, 5 to 24. Prenatal to 5 obviously is the most relevant for this, but you might be curious to look at the other ones as well. You can search. I will warn you that the search function is not the best because it will only return things that match the exact letters that you put in. So if you put in screens for developmental screens, it won't give you developmental screening because that's a slightly different word. So keep that in mind. If you're not seeing what you're looking for, that could be part of the issue. But let's go ahead and type in screening. And that should pull up our indicator that we have for developmental screening. And here you'll see we have our most recent data overall for King County of how many kids ages 0 to 5 have their parents reported that they remember having had a developmental screening. And when you click on that, you'll get taken to an interactive visualization where you can really dig down into the data. Usually the front page is a map that shows differences in different parts of King County. Not every one indicator will look exactly the same because it kind of depends on the data available to us, but we're breaking it down as much as we can because we know that having the more specific information is often more relevant to community organizations. So scrolling up a little bit, I think it's really important to notice that there are these different tabs across the top. So let's go ahead and click on demographics. And here's where you will see this broken down. Again, not by the same categories across all of the indicators, but as many as we are able to share. So we've got race and ethnicity. This indicator is from our Best Starts for Kids Health Survey, which we collected that data ourselves, and we were able to provide much more detailed race and ethnicity categories than many other data sources. So you'll see there can be specific options for different Asian American communities in King County, different African American communities in King County, different Latino communities. We also have information based on income, region, school district, language spoken at home. So definitely check it out. Hopefully you will be able to find some information that's relevant to the community that you serve. But again, we know that for many communities, we don't have as much data, and that's not going to ding you in your proposal. Just think creatively about how to show what you see as the need, whether that's stories that you hear in community, whether maybe it's other national data sources or national organizations focused on your community that you're aware of. Don't be afraid that if you feel that you serve a community that's not reflected in the data, that's okay. Just think about how to share your knowledge about that community's needs. So if we click on custom demographics, I want to point out if you see a little caret mark instead of a number in the bar chart, that means that unfortunately we don't have enough data yet to share information for that group. But if you really want to drill down, you can come to the custom demographics tab, and here you can compare 2 different groups at a time. So if you want to look at, let's go ahead and say gender, because those are pretty large groups in our survey, and child's race ethnicity. I haven't looked at this before, so I don't know what we'll find out. But here you can choose to look at two things, and that way you can look at, in this case, what their differences might be by gender and different race and ethnic groups of kiddos in their speeds. You might, if you serve a specific geographic and cultural community, you could look that up just by geography. And you might see, as we see here, a lot of suppression. But again, we're sharing as much as we can. So that's our Best Starts for Kids data resources. If you are intrigued by this, you can check out a webinar that we have that focuses more in depth on this. And then you also can get assistance from technical assistance that Tatsuko will be talking more about in a moment. So there is more support if you are curious about digging into this and need a little bit more assistance in finding what you're looking for. But to go back to the big topic at hand of your proposals, we want everybody to know this data is out there and be able to use it if they want to, but it's not required, and you should think creatively about whatever information you think is most important for your project proposal. Moving on to evaluation. The most important thing to know is that you will be required to participate in evaluation efforts if you're funded. So be sure to build time for that into your budget. It does take time to do all that data collection and reporting back to us, and we want to make sure that compensating you for that time is part of the contract and part of our work together. All programs will be required to share data with us to track your progress and outcomes. If you are administering ASQs, we do have a King County ASQ database that we will ask you to report to. So do keep that in mind. However, at this point, no evaluation plan is required as part of your proposal. For funded organizations, we'll be working together to develop an evaluation plan based on the specifics of your project. So all you need to worry about showing in your application is that you're willing to work together on that. You don't need to worry about including a plan at this point. And then we know oftentimes you might be involved in other data collection efforts as well, and we'll try to streamline that as much as we can to reduce the time burden of doing that data collection and reporting. So please feel free to ask any questions you have about data and evaluation, but for now I'm going to hand it back to Tatsuko.
Thanks so much, Sarah J. I just want to note, Sarah J mentioned the ASQ. She's referring to the Ages and Stages questionnaire, which is a specific developmental screening tool. We are not requiring or preferring that anybody use that particular tool, but if you are happening to use it, we do have a database already set up to collect that data. So that's what she was referring to there. So the good stuff, applications are due July 12th. You will have until July 9th at 2 p.m. to ask questions about this RFP. Questions should go to your TA providers. Those are listed in the RFP. We work with 6 TA providers. You can find that information in the RFP. If they're not able to answer a specific question, please submit questions to us through Zoom Grants. So you'll be able to do that through your activity log, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So get those applications in July 12th. Our review panel will be reviewing and rating all of the applications the week of July 12th. We'll be having interviews on August 3rd. It's the morning of August 3rd. Please block that time out on your calendar now so that we can ensure everybody who makes it to that stage is available. That's the only time that we do have open for interviews. So please make sure that it's held in your calendar now. And then we will be informing everyone of awards in early September. Next slide, please. So your submission requirements. Number 1 is that you get it in on time, July 12th at midnight. The system will automatically close the application at that time, so there is no flexibility around that. You'll see that narrative questions are limited to 3,000 characters, which is about 500 words. Again, that's set up within the program, so you won't have flexibility about going over that number. However, if you're able to answer the questions in fewer characters, you are welcome and encouraged to do that. You also will be required to submit a 12-month budget. Once you're logged into Zoom Grants, you'll see a budget tab, and that will show you exactly what data we're looking for you to include there. And as I mentioned, all questions to the program that can't be answered by your TA providers must be submitted through Zoom Grants. Our process does require that communication occurs that way. So you'll be able to do that, as I mentioned, through your activity log, which you'll see once you get logged in. There are instructions for how to connect to your activity log described in the RFP as well. And your responses will then be sent directly back to you through Zoom Grants, or they'll be posted to the entire group in a frequently asked questions document. So we're going to be updating that FAQ document regularly beginning next week. It will be posted in the library tab of your Zoom Grants account, where you'll see several attachments, so make sure to check that when you get logged in. And it'll be a good idea to check that FAQ document first before you submit questions. And for even if you don't have questions, to take a look at that, because we'll be answering questions from multiple applicants and you may learn something that you didn't think to ask. So please check there. And we are now going to open it up for questions that you may have for us today. You will need to unmute yourself. We've opened it up so folks are unmuted, but then you'll also need to unmute yourself individually if you do have a question you want to ask. I did not see any questions come through on the chat box, so now is a good time to jump in. And then I'll go ahead and answer a question that we got at another time while folks are working to formulate your questions. We did get somebody ask about the maximum request. It is $250,000, as I mentioned earlier. So please do not submit any requests for over $250,000. Looks like somebody's working on submitting a question, so we'll just continue to wait for a few moments.
While we're waiting for that question, I'd like to touch back on a point that we get asked a lot, and that's just a common question for RFPs, and that's organization types that are eligible to apply. And so organizations that are this announcement is open to include not-for-profit organizations, community-based, tribes and tribal organizations, schools and school districts, medical clinics, and public or governmental agencies serving communities in King County. Small not-for-profit and community-based organizations are, of course, encouraged to submit proposals, and partnerships are eligible to apply. We ask that one organization must agree to serve as the lead as the contract administrator.
Thanks, Juliet. So we have a question from Kelly. Is the intent to try to have as many children screened as possible? I'm wondering if we'll be evaluated on the number of children screened. You will not be evaluated on the number of children screened. Our goal is to reach populations who have limited or no access to screening. So as long as you are addressing those values and priorities that are pointed out in the RFP, and you take a look at the criteria that we'll be scoring on, that's what's most important to us. So ensuring that you're able to make a case for why a particular community is meeting your program, and then we'll be evaluating on that. We have another question from Stephanie. We have an early learning collaborative of 20+ organizations already meeting. Can a backbone organization be the lead on the grant? Yes, that is perfectly acceptable, as long as the lead organization meets all of those criteria that Juliet just described.
And I want to jump back to Kelly's question, because we did mention universal developmental screening is our ultimate goal with this strategy. However, this pilot project RFP right now, we really are looking at focusing on those communities that are either underserved or not served well by developmental screenings and referrals.
So we have a question from the phone. You do need to unmute your phone to be able to ask a question. Sarah, let us know if that does not seem to be the issue.
Hi. Now
Hi,
you
Sarah.
can hear me. You have to press *66, I guess, to unmute on the phone.
Thank you,
I think
Sarah.
that's what was going on. Sorry about that. There are tools that are not validated in some languages other than English, but are geared toward low or no literacy families that may be helpful to reach populations who will otherwise not be screened. What is your position on using tools that are not validated in other languages, translating without validation?
Yeah, so that question falls into the second bucket of applications that I described. We're going to be looking at programs that strengthen or adapt existing tools or programs to meet the needs of a specific community. So that is exactly one of the examples provided in the RFP. A tool may not be validated in a specific language. If that's a population that you're serving and you want to try to translate it or adapt it so it's more culturally relevant, that is definitely welcome in this pilot project. So you do not have to, you do have to use an existing screening tool. It does not have to be validated with the population that you are working with. So we have another question from Chris. We already do developmental screenings with the populations that we serve. Is the intent of this opportunity to fund existing screenings or build capacity to expand to communities outside of service scope? So it's for all of those. So again, this will be new screening programs, folks who have never done screening before, programs who are already doing screening but want to adapt it, as I just described for Sarah's question, or perhaps adapt in other ways to better meet the needs of the communities you're serving, or programs that are doing screening, don't feel any adaptations are needed for their programs, but are really looking to strengthen their referral component of their screening program. A question from Kelly, is there a minimum grant request amount? No, we encourage you to ask for all of the resources that you'll need to run this pilot project, keeping in mind the evaluation that Sarah J. mentioned, time for data collection, and any other components such as screening materials and training of your staff to provide screening. So keep all of those in mind. We don't have a minimum, but make sure that you're not sort of under funding your programs. So I don't see any other questions coming in.
I actually have a question on the phone. Can you hear me? Sorry,
Yes.
This is Edna Madalena.
Hi, Edna.
Hi. Thank you for all of this great information today. I did notice, and maybe I missed this in the slides, that this opportunity is funded for 12 months, but with the potential for further funding up to 24 months. Can you elaborate on that and what that might look like?
Yeah, so this RFP is for 12-month projects. However, as I described, we're currently undergoing a landscape analysis, and that will turn into a strategic planning process in the spring. These projects are going to inform our strategic planning work, and if there are projects that are well aligned with our strategic plan once we get there next year, there is a possibility that some of these projects will then become eligible for a contract renewal. So it's definitely not a guarantee, nor should it be an expectation, but there is a chance that if our strategic plan is really well aligned with some of these projects, that we might be able to do a contract renewal. We've got another question coming in through the chat box. So Kelly asked, when you say this is a pilot project, are we looking for projects that can be replicated in other communities? Not necessarily. So we know that some of the solutions that you all will be proposing for the communities that you work with are very specific to the communities that you work with, and that is okay. We definitely encourage those projects. We are looking, as I mentioned, to have some sort of learning collaborative where we'll be learning from each other's projects. So there may be learnings from your projects that are able to be applied in other communities, but it is not an expectation that the model that you develop will be replicable in different communities. So I'm going to give another call. I don't see any questions coming in at the moment, so I'm going to give another call for questions, and we'll wait just a moment for anyone that's still formulating or trying to get off of mute. Please work on that now, and we'll be able to take any last questions. All right, that's all that I see coming through. As I noted, if additional questions do come up that were answered today, you can ask one of our TA providers. You can submit those through Zoom grants, or Juliet is also going to be leading 4 additional information sessions in person located in different parts of the county. You can find that information in the RFP where those are located and the dates. But we have 4 more of those coming up this month. So you're welcome to drop in on one of those, or again, ask a TA provider or submit a question through Zoom Grants. And
excuse me. So I do have a question. Maybe it didn't download everything that I should have off the website, but it seems to be referring to about 13 questions that we have to answer in our narrative. I don't see this. Where are the 13 questions? What are they?
So there's a tab in your Zoom Grants that says application questions. It's not the same tab where there's the description of the RFP. And so all of the 13 questions will be listed there. They're not all narrative questions. The first 5 or 6 are more general questions about your program, kind of shorter answer questions, including which part of the county you serve and what populations you're serving. And then there's then it moves into the narrative questions. So if once you log into Zoom Grants and you're not able to find that tab for application questions, go ahead and submit that one. That's a question to submit through Zoom Grants.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, last call for questions. All right, great. Well, we will be submitting or posting any FAQs that we hear from you through Zoom Grants on that Libraries tab in your Zoom Grants account. So keep checking for that. And otherwise, we wish you all the best of luck, and thanks for joining us today.